All right, let's see. I want to share the screen. Let's see.
Welcome everybody to Flat Earth Nation, now known as Mudflood was Armageddon. And I'm going to be going over some of the orphan train things today with help from some other people. The first video, about a 6-7 minute video, you're going to see is just going to give a research papers. The earliest known thing I've seen on the orphan train since this whole mud flood thing, and I forget who was the first, hey, look at the orphan trains. But, I think it was either John Levy or Conspiracy R Us. And it opened up a lot of people's eyes. Very interesting stuff. So let's, this was even, but, we tied it to the mud flood resets and things like that. This is from like 2012. So, but the history of the orphan trains goes something like this.
The term orphan trains refers to the trains that took poor urban children to Midwestern and Western states to be placed with foster parents. The original program was started by Charles Loring Grace of the Children's Aid Society and soon had many imitators. It began around 1850 and lasted for nearly 80 years. The number of children estimated to have been placed out on orphan trains is over 250,000.
Tenements were built over extremely dangerous. 40 to 60 families lived on 1 to 7 8th-floor buildings. So basically, in the video, this man's audio was not working, but they're giving you a rundown of the 1880s, 1890s, and some pictures. So let me turn off their volume until maybe the girl comes back. So this will give you some background here. There's even only 250,000. That would make a big impact when you count. Well, if they got married eventually and had children, well, there's 1 million after just a few short years, and as they grow and expand. So there were lots of pictures, and I'm going to be sharing a video from Sherry, and I'll refresh my memory, but she's a homeschooling girl. So they wanted to provide food for work because they couldn't get the work done, and they needed to get workers.
So they go to different stops throughout the country, and they would literally put them up blocks for people to
So very mysterious times going on here, and then well, maybe we'll see some more of these pictures at the end, but I know that Sherry put a much. Let's see what she has to say.
but I wanted to talk to you today in this question
I am
narrative
not in the
video.
mood for sharing.
A lot of the buildings were first built around that time, or maybe around 1900, even though the town was founded in the 1700s. I was reading the records of a historian who said that they didn't really keep records before the 1880s or the 1890s. And even then, I thought to myself, why does it just seem like things are first happening now when they were supposedly happening long before? And it's not just my town. You can look up so many instances of events from all over the world, and a lot of them seem to be centered around that 1890 year. Not specifically 1890 always, but somewhere in that vicinity. So, and a lot of the strange things that I've talked about here seem to be centered on here. So I mentioned this one before. This is underground Eureka Springs. According to local history, 2 major streets in downtown Eureka Springs underwent considerable re-engineering in the year 1890. Main Street was the first official street in town, built in a low-level gulch alongside a small spring-fed creek. It suffered from frequent runoff problems and quickly earned the nickname Mud Street. And so I had mentioned this in a Mudflood video, hence the need for improvements. So what basically happened was that there's an underground town. They built one town on top of the other, and you will notice that, 1890 seems to be the year that they decided to do this. Another interesting thing around that time was the Johnstown flood, and I could be here all day going over things that happened around this time. But if you're interested, just go through some different things that happened throughout history and pay attention to the time, because you will find that it's not hard to find things that are happening at this time, and it always seems to be life-changing events. So anyway, here's the Johnstown flood. The Great Flood of 1889 occurred on Friday, May 31st, 1889, after the catastrophic failure of the South Fork Dam, located on the South Fork of the Little Conemaugh, I don't know how to say that, river, upstream of the town of Johnstown, Pennsylvania. The dam ruptured after several days of extremely heavy rainfall, releasing 14.55 million cubic meters of water. And so a lot of times the things that you see happening around the year 1890 involves some sort of destruction. So back over here, they talked about, it was from the runoff of the creek, and it had the name Mud Street, and unfortunately, I don't think you can zoom in on that picture, but destruction. Destruction seems to be a common theme around this time. Here we have the Seattle Underground, which you can actually visit now. And I mentioned this one in a video or two. I'll leave links to all of these posts, articles in the description box. But the main point of this, because I really do just want to get back to the lost generation, is, a lot of really strange things happen around this time. So in the mid-19th century, these structures were on the ground level and all the buildings were made of wood. And that actually doesn't make sense, because they're showing you the underground here, and that's not wood, that's brick. They're telling you that it's made of wood because it has to go with the whole everything burned down, because everything was made of wood. But if you look at this, that surely doesn't look like wood to me, that's brick. Anyway, however, most of them, so they're talking about the buildings, most of them were destroyed in the Great Seattle Fire on June 6th, 1889. That day, sometime after 2:30 in the afternoon, a cabinet maker, an employee in Victor Claremont's woodworking shop, accidentally forgot the glue that he was heating over a gasoline fire. The glue boiled over and caught fire, very easily spreading to the floor, covered in turpentine and wood chips. In the ensuing chaos, John tried to extinguish the fire with water, which made it even worse, because the water thinned the turpentine and spread the fire even more. Everyone inside got to get out of the building in the nick of time, but by the time the fire department came to the scene, the fire was out of control. The abundance of smoke made it impossible for the firemen to trace the source of the fire. On top of that, precisely that day, the fire chief happened to be out of town, so convenient, and the volunteers who came to the scene made a mistake of using too many hoses at once. And this led the water pressure to drop completely. And again, what you're seeing here is an underground building. And again, that doesn't look like wood, that looks like brick, but we're told that everything burned down because it's wood. But the main point of this is 1889, and we always hear some outlandish story of how these things happen. And it always happens to be some coincidence that the fire chief was out of town. Okay, so here we have mystery of why Chattanooga raised its downtown by a level. This is Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I'm not going to read the full article. If you want to, again, I'll leave a link in the description. Here it says, at some point in time, possibly between 1875 and 1905, which, yeah, 1890 is right in the middle of that, Chattanooga built up its roads and abandoned the first stories of the buildings in the downtown of the city. This is why when people comment on my channel telling me that all of these basement level windows were built there originally because they were always the basement. You know, they were never the first floor, but no, a lot of them were the first floor. I also have to say, it's funny. Someone from another channel must have mentioned me in a derogatory way because I have so many people commenting on my video about the Titans and the mud fossils and melted buildings, that video. So many people commenting on that, very snide comments. So I actually want to thank the person who sent me there because I'm getting a lot more views on that. So thank you. But yeah, I think that's what happened. You know, you've made it when people send their trolls after you. Anyway, as I got distracted, at some point in time, possibly between 1875 and 1905, Chattanooga built up its roads and abandoned the first stories of the buildings in the downtown of the city, turning them into basements. Today, no one knows exactly why or how it happened. The popular theory is that Chattanooga raised its city a story to escape the devastating flooding the Tennessee River wrought every few years. So they don't know. They don't know why the town was built on top of another town. And you always have to wonder, where do they get all of that fill? You know, how do they fill up all those roads depending on how big the downtown was? But again, we have something else strange happening right around that time period. We also have in 1890 that the census records were destroyed by fire. So there you go again. You know, 1890 and destruction, they seem to go hand in hand. And lastly, before actually talking a little bit more about the lost generation, I just wanted to show you. So as you can see up here, this is from a website about Ellis Island. And this was on a timeline. So as you can see here, again, I'm going to read through it. You can go back and read through it. But 1893 to 1902, so again, right in that time period, on June 15th, 1897, with 200 immigrants on the island, a fire breaks out in one of the towers of the main building and the roof collapses. Though no one is killed, all Ellis Island records dating back to 1840 and the Castle Garden era are destroyed. So not only do we have all these strange things happening, but we also have some pretty substantial records being destroyed, usually by fire. So we have first the 1890 census, and now we have the records being destroyed on Ellis Island. And so I think that a lot of it ties back to many of the people that we do look at as being, that I look at least. I can't say we because I don't know if I speak for you, but yeah, I look at that as the lost generation. So here are some children from the orphan train. There were tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, I believe. We'll go back and read a little bit about that then. Actually, let's just do that right now. Oh, that's not even it. Let me find it. Okay. So the orphan train movement was a supervised welfare program that transported children from crowded eastern cities of the United States to foster homes located largely in rural areas of the Midwest. The orphan trains operated between 1854 and 1929, relocating about 250,000 children. The co-founders of the orphan train movement claimed that these children were orphaned, abandoned, abused, or homeless. This was not always true. They were mostly the children of new immigrants and the children of the poor and destitute families living in these cities. So if you're going to talk about a lost generation, yeah, this isn't only 1890, but it still falls right in that area, and it falls, a lot of the children do fall into that time period that they're called the lost generation. And if any children were start lost, it would be those in the orphan train movement. And you have to wonder, yes, they do have some reasons that they were orphaned or abandoned, abused, homeless. 250,000 children, though, I can't help but wonder if there really was another reason that there were all of these children. It just doesn't make sense to me. That is a lot a lot of children. There were an estimated, here it says, 30,000 in New York City alone in the 1850s in foster homes. So there's more to the story that they're not telling us. Here's just another photo of some children on the orphan train. And I have to say that I think it's really interesting that I watched a documentary about the orphan train, and there were people from this one town, and they were trying to get the record. They were trying to get the actual names of their parents. They had arrived there, they were adopted by families, but they wanted to know who their real families were. And a couple of the people actually had the same last name. And at least in the documentary, they didn't make the connection that they could possibly be related. But I found it strange that, yeah, there were children with the same last name. And I also found out that a lot of these kids didn't even really know their last name. They would assign them a last name. Say if they were found at a church, they would give them the last name Church. If they, were given or found, maybe by a blacksmith shop, they would be given the last name Smith, or, Walker, or just, they were just kind of assigned generic names having to do with how they were found or how they ended up there. So even though people may search for their ancestry, those who were in the orphan trains, a lot of times they won't actually find it because this isn't their real last name. And even my own personal story is that my grandfather, he would not tell me. His last name was Wilson, but he wouldn't tell anyone his real last name. So apparently Wilson was not his real last name. He wouldn't tell anyone his real last name. And that's just another story from that whole generation. So many mysteries, so many questions that we have that it seems like they're not going to be answered. So here are some other children from the orphan train movement, all lined up, looking spiffy. And this was the first one that I showed you. Here are a bunch of them posing on the orphan train. Put a photo op. A bunch of orphans who are getting ready to be shipped off to foster homes. Look at the poses. I don't know. It seems so surreal. And then on top of that, we have the incubator babies. Have you ever heard of the incubator babies? Yes. Well, we'll get back to her later. You see, here we go. Baby incubators. From boardwalk sideshow to medical marvel. In the late 19th century, thousands of premature babies' lives were saved while attracting oglers at amusement parks. And so that's the man who was said to have saved the lives of babies. But yeah, they were a common sideshow in the late 19th and early 20th century. Incubator babies, and they will tell you that they were placed there because the hospitals didn't want to use the incubators, so it was, to keep these infants alive. But they were actually shown around like circus freaks. Here we have some people standing in front of, it says infant incubators. These are at the World's Fairs. Infant incubators with living infants. I sure hope that they're living. I hope they wouldn't show any other kind of infants. But again, I always mention how impeccably dressed they were in these times. And I have to say that a lot of times I wonder how staged these things were. I mean, we stage photos nowadays anyway, but there are a lot of people who even believe that these are just actors and actresses who put on period clothing to kind of push through a narrative. I don't know if that's true or not, but I certainly wouldn't put anything past anyone. But so there's one, and then here's some people going through. I think this was at Coney Island, and they are just spectators going through to look at all the babies in the incubators. Babies that a lot of times you have to wonder, where did they actually come from? And a lot of people will mention that you could adopt these babies from the incubators. And so far, I haven't been able to find a whole lot of evidence supporting that people could just go and adopt these babies. But I do know that it happened, because here we have an actress. Her name was Marie Dressler. And yeah, she adopted an incubator baby. So this was in 1904. And it says, Marie Dressler adopts a baby. It's a Coney Island incubator mite and is to be brought up in style and bear the actress's name. So here we do have one newspaper article about an actress, and she was a rather famous actress who adopted an incubator baby. Here she's mentioned in another newspaper. So Colorado Historic Newspapers Collection, and it just mentions right here what it says here. Marie, here, oh, is it Dressier or is it Dressler? I think they just spelled it wrong. Let me go back and see. It is Dressler, okay. So Marie Dressler, the actress, has adopted one of those incubator babies, and her press agent will now have something substantial to work on. So here again, you know, it is shown that one of these incubator babies was indeed adopted. So it just raises the question of going back to the lost generation of individuals born between 1883 and 1900. And yeah, not all of the years add up exactly right, but how often are we not told the truth about our timeline or lots of other stuff? But, you know, it all seems that so many of these strange things happen right around the same time. So we've got strange destructive things going on in the landscape. We've got new populations of people going into different towns. We have records in certain towns like my town that are first starting to be kept in the 1880s and the 1900s. Then you have other records like from 1890 or from Ellis Island that were destroyed. And at Ellis Island, they were destroyed, all the records from 1840 up to, I think it was the 1890s when that happened. And then you have the orphan trains, and we have the incubator babies. And, you know, you just can't help but wonder, was there something else? Who really was the lost generation? I can understand calling it the lost generation, having to do with World War I, but as most of us know, who know how things work, there's always another meaning underneath things that a lot of times we have to dig for. And I think this is one of those times. You know, we've got Generation X, we've got Gen Z, we have the baby boomers and the lost generation. And it just so happens to be during the time that records are being lost, places are being destroyed. And yeah, it seems like people are coming out of some sort of reset. Some sort of renewal is happening. And all of a sudden we have these children popping up, and we're wondering, where did all these kids come from? Who are their parents? What happened to their parents? I don't know. Anyway, that's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them either here or over on Instagram. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have a great day.
How about that? Is that some gold right there? Sherry, everybody, from There's No Place Like Home. And as usual, you know, she's doing the homeschooling, doing the mom thing, and doing videos. I hope she's not embarrassing everybody else out there, because man, I think she's working. And just like you know what John just said, you know, I'll be around, you know, at 7. I'll be doing a video tonight with a man named Jerry, who's got some information coming about where is the land of Goshen. And did he have to give them land there, and is going to be ready to welcome Christians to a place if they need a place to flee? Sounds like it. And I think we should check it out tonight together. So thank you so much. And thank you, Sherry. Thank everybody for being here. It's a flat earth nation. Mudflood was Armageddon. You know I'm never going to tell you anything else. Why would I? I'm trying to prove that I have your best interest at heart. Amen. Hallelujah.